Welcome to your deep dive. Today, we're tackling this question that I've had for a while about Clonezilla. Can it really help me upgrade my tech? Especially with these Lenovo plans I've got and this whole Linux thing I've been looking into. You've sent over a ton of articles and videos about Clonezilla, so let's dig in.
What's really interesting here is you're not just looking to understand Clonezilla, you actually want to use it. You're thinking about switching from HDD to SSD, figuring out the whole different drive sizes thing,
Mhm.
and even maybe trying out Linux.
Yeah, it's like I'm standing at the edge of a tech diving board. I'm ready to jump in, but first, I need to know what I'm diving into. So, tell me about Clonezilla.
Think of Clonezilla as the Swiss Army knife of disk imaging and cloning. It's free, open source, and often mentioned with those big names like True Image or Norton Ghost. But, and this is important, it's not just one tool. There are actually three.
Wait, really? I've only ever heard people talk about Clonezilla like it's just one thing.
A lot of people don't realize that. So you've got Clonezilla Live, which is perfect if you're just using one computer, which seems like it'd be perfect for you. Then there's Clonezilla Light Server and Server Edition, which are for, like when you need to clone a whole office worth of computers.
Wow, I can barely handle one computer, let alone 40. So, Clonezilla Live it is. Now, I was reading that Clonezilla is supposed to be super efficient because it only works on certain data blocks. It's like packing for a trip and only bringing what you need, not your whole wardrobe.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. That used blocks only thing means Clonezilla is way faster than those old cloning programs, especially if your drive isn't completely full. It's like speed packing for your data. In fact, some tests show it can restore at 8 gigabytes per minute.
8 gigabytes a minute. Okay, now you're just showing off. But seriously, that's incredible. What else makes Clonezilla so special?
One of its biggest strengths is how compatible it is. It works with both Windows and Linux without any issues. And it supports a bunch of different file systems. That's a big deal for you since you're thinking about upgrading your Lenovo, which runs Windows, and maybe trying out Linux.
So, no need to worry about Clonezilla playing nicely with both. It's like a universal translator for hard drives.
Exactly. And it's not just about basic compatibility. Clonezilla can handle those more complex disk setups. Like whether your drive uses the older MBR format or the newer GPT partitioning, Clonezilla can deal with both. And it even supports the more advanced stuff, like LVM2, which is like having adjustable compartments on your hard drive, and LUKS encryption if you're worried about security.
Okay, I'll be honest, some of those terms sound a bit foreign to me, but it's good to know Clonezilla speaks that tech language, even if I don't quite get it yet. But is it easy to use?
Clonezilla have a few different deployment options to make it easier. There's an unattended mode, so you can automate everything, boot parameters, so you can customize it, and you can choose to store your images locally or on a network. That's like a customizable toolkit.
Sounds like there are options for both casual users like me and the hardcore techies. But even the best tools have their quirks, right?
That's true. Let's go over a few things to watch out for when you're using Clonezilla. For instance, Clonezilla wants your destination partitions to be at least the same size or bigger than the source.
So that means no shrinking my data to fit on a smaller drive. There's no, like, magical compression algorithm or something.
Not really. It's more like moving your stuff from a small box to a bigger one. You're going to need that extra space on the destination drive.
Makes sense. I've run into that issue with real-life moving before. What about backups? Can Clonezilla do those incremental backups, where it just copies the changes?
That's something that Clonezilla is still working on, actually. Right now, it's all about those full image backups. Think of it as like taking a snapshot of your entire drive at a specific moment.
Okay, so full snapshots it is. Anything else I should watch out for before I try out Clonezilla?
Yeah, just a couple things to keep in mind. When you're creating an image of a partition, you got to make sure it's not being used. Like imagine trying to move a piece of furniture while someone's still sitting on it.
Oh, yeah, that wouldn't go well.
Exactly. You need to unmount the partition first. It's like politely asking them to move for a bit.
Unmounting. Got it. And I remember from the articles, you can't just browse through the Clonezilla image files directly. It's not like looking through a photo album.
Yeah, you can't just pull out individual files.
Right.
Although there is a way around that. If you're comfortable with the command line, you can mount the whole image file as a loop device. It's basically like creating a virtual drive from the image.
So it is doable, but maybe not for beginners or those who aren't comfortable using the command line. Okay, so we've talked about features and a few quirks. Now let's dive into those YouTube videos you mentioned, especially the Lenovo Legion upgrade, because that's something I'm seriously thinking about.
Definitely. You seem really interested in seeing Clonezilla in action, and that video is a perfect real-world example. The guy wanted to upgrade his Lenovo Legion, going from a 256 GB SSD to a 1 TB SSD.
Yeah, I feel that. I could really use the extra space. So how do you use Clonezilla to actually do the upgrade?
He used a really smart two-step process. First, he created a bootable USB drive with Clonezilla on it.
Hmm.
You can think of it like a special key that boots your computer straight into Clonezilla. Then he connected the new 1 TB SSD using an external enclosure, like it's giving the new drive a temporary home outside the laptop.
So he's got his Clonezilla key and his new drive all set up. What next?
He booted the laptop from that USB drive, which launched Clonezilla, and then he started the cloning process. Basically makes a perfect copy of the old drive on the new one.
So he cloned the entire 256 GB drive onto the 1 TB.
Exactly. But here's the thing. If he had stopped there, he'd only be using a quarter of that new 1 TB drive. That's where the second tool comes in, Gparted.
Ah, Gparted. It's like bringing in an expert tailor to get everything to fit perfectly.
Exactly. He used Gparted after cloning to resize the partitions on the new SSD. He's essentially expanding his storage space to use the entire 1 TB.
It's like buying a bigger suitcase and actually using all of it. No wasted space. Clonezilla for the cloning, Gparted for resizing, a perfect pair. Now, you mentioned some other videos too. Any other gems of wisdom from those cloning adventures?
For sure. One thing they really emphasized was double-checking your source and destination drives before you start cloning.
Yeah, I bet. I'd hate to accidentally wipe my main drive because I selected the wrong one.
It's always better to be safe than sorry, especially when you're messing with multiple drives.
Yeah.
Another important point was how flexible Clonezilla is when it comes to what you want to image. You can clone a whole disk, or you could just do specific partitions if you want.
So I could just clone my operating system if I wanted to and keep all my data separate. That's cool.
Exactly. It gives you options. And of course, the videos also showed how to restore an image, which is just as important as making it in the first place. I mean, a backup's no good if you can't use it right.
It's like having an escape route planned out.
Yeah.
You got to know how to use it. One thing that I thought was interesting was this thing about sector by sector copying. It sounds really thorough, but also like it could take forever.
You're right that sector-by-sector copying can take a while, especially with bigger drives. It's like photocopying every page of a huge encyclopedia, even the blank ones. Clonezilla has the option, but you got to decide if you really need that level of detail.
So it's a trade-off then. Sometimes you need every single thing, and sometimes a quick snapshot works. As we're wrapping up this Clonezilla deep dive, what are the main takeaways you want listeners to remember?
Well, you're clearly looking for a way to combine different tools and use the best one for each step. Just like with that Lenovo example, Clonezilla is great at cloning, but pairing it with Gparted lets you use all of the space on your new drive.
It's all about having the right tools, right? Just like a mechanic needs more than just a wrench, we need more than just one program for most tech stuff.
Exactly. And don't forget about clear step-by-step instructions, which is what those YouTube videos were great at. Sometimes seeing someone else do it first can really help you feel confident trying it yourself.
Absolutely. It's like having a virtual mentor.
I agree. And that kind of leads into a question for you, especially with your interest in open source. We've talked about what Clonezilla is and how to use it, but what about the bigger picture?
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. What else is out there with Clonezilla?
Well, since it's open source, you can customize it. Think about it. Making Clonezilla work exactly how you want it to, or even helping make it better. You go from just a user to a collaborator.
Wow, from cloning my hard drive to actually shaping how Clonezilla evolves, that's amazing.
And that brings us to a final thought for you to consider. We've seen how well Clonezilla and Gparted work together. What other tools could you add to your tech toolkit for cloning drives and upgrading your system? It's about making those tools work together to achieve whatever you want to do.
I love that. It's not just about knowing the tools, it's about knowing how to use them together to reach your goals. Well, there you have it. Your deep dive into Clonezilla. We've talked about its pros, its cons, and we even saw it in action.
From those core features to real-world examples, you should have a good idea of whether Clonezilla is the right tool for you. And maybe you'll even be inspired to make it your own, or even contribute to the open source community that makes it all possible.
Until next time, happy cloning.